Welcome to Money Matters. My name is Joe Ritter with Zacchaeus Financial Counseling. This is a seminar that we normally offer in a group setting, and I wanted to make sure that this seminar could be available to the public, so I'm coming to you from my office. During our time together, we're going to be looking at various financial literacy topics, very basic financial planning, and I trust that you will find this to be useful and helpful for you. So let's get started. What would it be like if you could order ice cream through the screen? I'll give you just a few seconds to think about that. That's probably an oddball question that you've not heard before. I think it would be very interesting if we could order ice cream through the screen. That's just an oddball question. Now, I have another question. What is this? Here you see an image that we have a hard time knowing what it is. We're going to see a picture later on in this seminar that will explain what this is. For now, I'll give you just a brief hint. It's a close-up. Hopefully not you, but some of us have probably received notices like this. Taxes due, final notice, debt collection notices in the mail, late payment notices. These all create stress, what we would call financial stress or financial strain. And we very much do feel stress relating to money issues. So hopefully when we're done with this seminar, you will feel a little bit better, much more clear about how to navigate all this. Now on your screen, you'll see the balance sheet. So as we get started here, I just have a question for you. What is a balance sheet? What is the purpose? The purpose of a balance sheet is that it lists on the one side what our total assets are, and it lists on the other side what our total liabilities are. Now, this is not a budget. This is a snapshot in time of our total net worth. So assets here could include car, savings account, checking account, a house that we own, or other property, investments, things like that. And then liabilities would include credit cards, student loan debt, car loan, mortgage, things like that. So this is a total of what we own minus what we owe. Now, hopefully, you can see that there's a problem on this balance sheet. I'll give you just a second here to try to look for it. There's something wrong with this balance sheet. Do you know what it is? You can see here that our net worth, what I own minus what I owe, is a negative. That means I owe more than I own. Is that a good thing? Hopefully you said no to that question. That's not a good thing. We want this to be a positive number. Now we have here a budget. Now that's the dreaded B word, right? Nobody likes the word budget. Nobody likes to do a budget. Nobody likes to live by a budget. So we're not going to talk about how to fill this document in during this seminar. Instead, I want to talk about this budget, and I want to point out a few things. Number one, it's got a problem. Do you see it? Give you just a second to look at it. Maybe you've noticed that the problem is the difference between the income and expenses is a negative. There's that dreaded negative again. What does this mean? Well, this means that our inflows are less than our outflows. It means that we're spending more than we're making. Can you survive like this for very long? And hopefully you would say no to that. Let me just point out something here, that if we have a negative ending balance on our budget, which we would call a deficit, then we must finance that from somewhere. Now, if we go back to the balance sheet, then we would be adding credit card debt here to make up this difference, this $1,233.40. So if we don't make any changes to this budget, we're going to create a larger negative net worth on the balance sheet. Do you see that? So this money has to come from somewhere. Now, no, we're not the government. We're not able to print money the way that the government does. We're not also able to go into debt forever and ever, as deep as possible, and never paid off. That's the government. We live in real life, where real debts have to be paid off, and this is going to be a problem. At some point, if we don't deal with this, we're going to end up in a very difficult place. So, how do we deal with this? How do we erase this negative number on the budget? Now, let's point out a couple things. If you've been looking at this budget, you'll notice that there's an item on here of $1,500 for savings. So let's just stop here and ask a question. This number, this $1,500, if we took it out of the budget, in other words, if we did not set aside this money for savings, we could do away with our budget problem, couldn't we? We could make our budget balance. We could make our budget balance so that all of our income goes out through expenses and whatever other categories we have on the budget. Hopefully some of that will be savings. So is it safe to remove the savings line or to adjust the savings line? Now, hopefully you said, I don't know. Savings is a good thing. We need savings. So we need savings to help get us through a rough patch. We need savings as a buffer against life. When the car breaks down, when our children get sick, when something happens, we have a major life event, we have a bill that comes up that we were not expecting, we can use our savings as a buffer against life. I think everyone agrees that we should have some amount in savings. So perhaps doing away with or reducing savings to solve the problem is not the best approach. Okay, now we have a line item here for rent of $6,000. That's a big amount of money on this budget. Actually, the reason that I included rent here is that $6,000 is the biggest expense on the budget. So this item we might be able to do something with. If we did something here, it would probably have a much bigger impact on the budget than if we messed with something smaller. Should we reduce our rent expense? Now, this is a very subjective question because in some areas you would not be able to afford a place for less than $6,000 a year. When I offer the Money Matters class, often I will get people say, I can't live on $6,000. There's no way that I can find a place to live cheaper than that. Okay, so are there other options? Well, maybe if we knew that it was temporary, we might have other options. Less favorable options might include a roommate or moving in with someone else, boarding temporarily with your brother or sister or a friend, or going back to your parents' house just for a short while until you get more income or you are more financially stable. So maybe those are some options. One of the reasons that I have this line item here is that we should always look for the biggest item on the budget and then consider, could we do something with it? Could we reduce it so that we can free up more money for the budget? So it's always good to look at the biggest things first. That's where you can get your best traction and your quickest results, looking at the biggest items first. Maybe here housing is not the best thing, but we do need to look at it. What about some other ideas? Do you have any other ideas on how we could reduce this deficit? Maybe there are some other things that you would think of that could be done away with, even if it's just on a temporary basis. Okay, so now we have a question here. What is a goal? I want you to think about this for just a second. What is a goal? A goal is the object of our ambition or effort. That's a very simple definition, but if we put some hands and feet on it to try to put a real image on it, what is a goal? Why do you wake up in the morning? What motivates you? What drives you? What do you hope to achieve in life? Why do you go to work? Why do we have relationships? All those things play into a goal and help us understand what our goals are. Let's keep that in mind as we keep going. Okay, have you ever heard of the cash envelope system for budgeting? Now there's that dreaded B word again, isn't it? Some of you have probably heard of this. Others have probably used it. Many people know what a budget is and they know how to use it. But a lot of people do not know how to make a budget work. How do I actually live within the budget? So I've got this number, but how do I achieve this number? Well, the cash system here can really help. Living by a budget sometimes means changing our habits, changing our spending habits. Let's say that I have $400 a month for groceries. How do I make sure that I do not go over that? One way is using what we call a cash envelope system. Basically what we do is we take discretionary items. Now these would be things such as dining out, giving gifts, baby supplies, clothing, groceries, things that you would possibly change the amount every month, or you're going to the store and you're making a purchase that's not going to be the same amount every single month. A set amount, we would look at more of a cell phone bill, a water bill, a power bill, things like that, which usually stay within a certain range. And you know that it's coming, where here you can easily go to the store and spend several $100s in one shot. The sky's the limit, unless your credit card says you've reached your limit first. So what's to stop you from spending more when you go to the store? And that's why we're looking at these items. If you go out to eat at a restaurant, what's to keep you from spending $50 as opposed to $20? The cash system takes the cash that we allocate on the budget and puts that amount of cash set aside by each category, and then you spend from that cash. Just these categories, we can see total up to $457 a month. So what we would do is we would take the cash that the budget sets aside for each category, and we would put that in a separate envelope. And then when we need to make a purchase from this category, we would take that envelope, or we would take the cash from it and use that cash to make the purchase. But here's the beauty of it. When the cash is gone, you stop spending. So that's a way in which you can exercise discipline and stay within the budget. You know that with this cash, your budget need for the month is met. And you know that once the cash is gone, you stop spending, so therefore that keeps you in the budget. It's a very simple way of dealing with trying to stick by a budget. Now, something interesting about using this cash system here is that when you go to the store, now you also have to do some micro budgeting. Let's say you're going to the grocery store and you're going to buy groceries. Groceries is $160 a month. This is probably not going to be in your budget. Yours might be higher, yours might be lower. So George goes to the grocery store and he knows that he only has budgeted $160 a month. Now, he knows that he needs certain items of food to live on for that month. So how does he stay within budget? Now he has to micro budget. He has to make this money last for the whole month. So when he goes to the store, he says, well, I need milk, and I need bread, and I need meat, and I need these other things first. And then if there's extra money left over, he can circle back and say, well, I'd like to buy some of these other things now. Maybe I want to buy donuts and cookies and some crackers and things that I don't necessarily need, but I would enjoy them. What are some other ways that you can make this money stretch farther? What about coupons or shopping sales? Some of us do not have time to do that. I work, so I would not necessarily have time to do that. But my wife stays home with our children, and she spends a lot of time looking up the sales, finding coupons, and shopping certain days. She's come to learn when the store marks down certain items. So she'll go there and try to get items that are on sale, try to get items that have been marked down, maybe items that will soon be expiring, but she knows that we will be able to use them or freeze them before they would go bad. And then, of course, clipping coupons. These are all methods that we can use to stretch our money. So I know that some of you will be pushing back here and saying there's no way that you can live on $160 a month just for groceries. But you can stretch this money quite a bit further if you used some of these other methods. Okay, now here's another question. What is a need? I think this is a good question to talk about when we're talking about budgeting. We just looked at George's budget, some ways that George could stretch his budget farther. So what is a need? Well, a need would be something basic such as food, shelter, clothing, transportation. Those would be needs. We can argue about other things. I've heard some people say that cigarettes are a need or cell phones are a need. So maybe we can step out of the normal needs here and add some others. But for now, let's just look at the basic needs. Food, shelter, clothing, medical care, transportation, things such as that. We need to make sure that as we're going through the budget, that we take care of these needs first. So if we go back and look at George's budget, we might be able to help George work through these questions. Do you have your needs in here? Let's make sure that this is done first, and then we can talk about other things. Uh-oh, there's our picture. Do you remember what the first picture was? Okay, so the first picture was a close-up of the top of the stem on the apple on the bottom of your screen. I saw these apples laid out on my friend's kitchen counter when I was over at his house one day, and I thought this would make a neat picture, so here it is. We can also use this image to discuss a very important topic. Many times when I deal with people on personal finance, I find that they're focused on meeting today's needs. They're focused on things that are really pressing. We can think back to one of those first screens where we had all those past due notices. When we get caught up in the pressing needs of today's finances, we lose sight of the bigger things in life. When the pressures mount, stress runs high, and we're really strained to the max, we lose sight of things like our health, our children, our marriage. And hopefully one of the things that you get out of this is that we need to take a step back. If we take a step back and look at where we are, and that if we made some changes, we might be able to navigate this. You know, one of the things too is I'm looking at what is possible. And maybe this is a time in your life when you want to make some serious changes. Maybe you're at a place in life where this isn't really where you want to be, or this is not really where you want to be at all. You're ready to move on. How do you do it? Now, how you do it is you take a step back, and maybe it's time to rethink what's important in life. Maybe it's time to look at my needs and say, I need to focus on these first, and look at my goals and say, what are my goals? What are your goals? Going back to school, getting a new career, getting another job, purchasing a house someday, starting a family. All those can be real good goals. I've worked with several clients that come to me in a mess. I'll just be honest about it. And I will ask them, what are your goals? And they will say to me, I don't know. So I'll say, well, how can I help you? If you don't know where you're headed, what's my role? I can help you organize numbers on a sheet of paper so that there's no deficit, so that you can build a positive net worth, so that your money lasts all the way through the month, but you won't stick with it if you have no goals. So this picture can remind us to take a step back and look at the big picture of life. What really matters? And how do I get out of this place where I am and get into a better place? All right, let's keep going. What about wants? What is a want? Now here is where I might put things like cigarettes and cell phones, cable TV, and things like that. Wants can also be vacations. They can be a new furniture set. Wants could be almost anything that we would not put under a need. A want might be a bigger house, a bigger apartment, but maybe I don't need one. Or a nicer car, but maybe the car that I have gets me through today. So those are some possible wants. You can probably think of other wants. All right, now, the purpose of the budget. What I like to look at here is that the budget is in the center of our goals, our needs, and our wants. The budget tries to look at all three of these things. So if I have a goal of, let's say, going back to school and starting a new career or starting a business, I need to balance that so that I can reach my goal in a certain time. And then I also want to make sure that I can enjoy some wants, because life is boring if we never get to enjoy anything. And then make sure that I have my needs met. So the budget has to look at all three of these. And that's why it was good for us to look at those apples. Because here we can take a step back and say, what really matters in life? What matters to you? The budget can really help here because you're making sure that instead of money just flying away, you're putting your money to work. You're giving your money a purpose. And you're saying, I want to meet my needs. I'd like to have a few wants as well. But I also really want to meet some of these goals. These goals matter to me. So the budget should be written in a way that you're making sure that you can achieve all three of these. Okay, now here are some worksheets that you can use to start working on a budget. This worksheet tries to help you determine the amount of needs. So If you're at a place where you're not sure how much things cost, you might use this worksheet to determine what is it going to cost for me to get into an apartment. And you can put a number down here for housing. What is it going to cost for me to get a car or to get around if I'm not going to purchase a car? What about clothing or the power bill, the water bill, things like that? Heat for the house, that's important. Telephone, medical care. So you can work through this worksheet and put numbers here. And then once you're done with this worksheet, you can put these numbers over onto a budget. Same thing with goals. Here you would list out what your goals are, and then to help you determine how much money should go in the budget, you have a column here that lists how long is it going to take for me to reach this. You start with the goal, and you start with the amount of money that it's going to take to reach your goal. Let's just say going back to school. It'll take me 2 years to finish up what I need. So we call the local college and we ask them how much does it cost per semester. We times that by 4 and we put this number in here. Now the next question is, when do I want to go back to school, or when can I start going back to school? Let's say I want to go back to school within 12 months. So I put 12 here in the third column. And then I can divide the total cost by 12. And that number goes onto my budget. Now, if the budget still does not work after doing this, then maybe I need to come back here and realize that it'll take me 15 months. Just so I can afford it, I can set money aside. Now, while we're talking about goals, let's also talk about how we can stick to the budget. Because here's where goals are really important. If you have no goals, it'll be hard for you to stick to the budget. What will end up happening is that you'll just feel as though the budget restricts you and you'll get tired. I know because I've been here. Believe it or not, there was a time in my life when I was not very good with money, and some things happened. I lost my job. We had to move across country, and we owned a house that we tried to sell that would not sell. So we left this town, moved across country, put our house on the market, and had to rent a place where the new job was. And so now we had 2 house payments. And there was not enough money coming in. I was working full-time, but still not enough money to cover 2 house payments. And we ended up pretty deep in credit card debt trying to make things work. It was a very painful time in my life, but I learned something valuable. Once I was able to get out of that mess, we were able to start making enough money to cover these 2 house payments. Actually, we owned that other house for several years before it finally sold. And I was able to start making enough money to cover both payments. We got a tenant in there that was helping to pay the cost of the house. But once everything was all done and we started paying on the credit card debt, I looked at this mountain that we had to climb and I said, oh my goodness, we're never going to get out of this. How do we do this? And I felt so lost. Something that I learned is that after about 6 months of really sticking to a budget and cutting things back and being focused, you get tired. And after about 1 year, you're ready to be done with it. But often it takes several years to get things really turned around. It might take you two or 3 years or more to get all of your debt paid off and get everything back to where you really want it to be truly financially stable. So how do you make a budget work if you know that you're going to be at this life, this new way of living, this restrictive spending for 12 months or more? And I'll tell you, it's hard. It's not easy. One way that I believe that you can deal with this is to build short-term goals into your budget. So to help you feel as though you're actually making progress, one thing that you can do is plan to spend money every 3 months or 4 months or 6 months. Not once every month, because obviously that would blow your budget. I was working with a couple one time, and I could tell that they were in a pretty big financial mess. I could also tell that she was really strained and that he wasn't real sure that there was a problem. So I finally asked a question that I didn't realize it would be such a charged question, but I felt like it was right to ask it. And I said, "What would a weekend away do for you?" And she broke down in tears and she said, "Oh my goodness, it would feel so good if I could just get away from this." And he looked at his wife and said, "I had no idea that you were so stressed." And it opened conversation for them. And I said, "Okay, let's do this." I said, "I know some ideas. There's a riverboat cruise in Knoxville. You can go down there and go on this cruise, and you feel like you're out in the middle of nowhere. It takes several hours. You can have dinner while you're on this cruise, and you can spend the night at a place in Knoxville, and it might cost you $200 to do this for just the weekend." And I said, "So what if we started a budget for that? And after a month or two, you had the money set aside for that in your budget, that you could take this money and go get a nice weekend away, just get a break." And she said, "That would be great." And that's what I would also suggest for you. Maybe it's not a weekend away. Maybe you feel fine and you don't need that. But what if every 6 months you knew that you could do something with your money besides just always scrimping and saving? You know, the famous line, "I'll eat rice and beans as long as I need to." Well, eventually you'll get tired of that. And then what I don't want to see happen is that you just blow your budget. Go out and get a 5-course meal at this beautiful restaurant and spend hundreds of dollars and just gorge on filet mignon and all things like that. That's blowing the budget. So what if we built into our budget different places where we could enjoy our money and not feel so restricted? Maybe a new tablet or a new piece of furniture. There's something that you would not necessarily spend money on, but if you knew that you could afford it in your budget, and you know, we're talking about maybe $25, $40 a month, that you would set aside for this, and then every few months, no more than 6 months, you would have the money set aside to go out and do it. So you don't feel quite so restricted and bottled up by your budget. Then we have wants. Yes, we need to make sure that we can enjoy things in life. Life is not just about scrimping and saving and living by the skin of our teeth with our wallet. So let's make sure that we can enjoy some wants as well. You will need some time away, so plan for that vacation. Even if you're not living on a tight budget and don't need to really scale back and be very, very tight with your money, you might still want to save a special cruise, a trip overseas. All those things might play in here. So all that goes here on the wants. Things that we don't need, things that are not goals, but things that we would enjoy doing. The list could be endless. A new cell phone, a better cell phone plan, a cable television, anything that is not a need and not a goal, we can put on this worksheet. And then again, we're going to figure out how much it costs. We're going to figure out how long it'll take for me to save up the money to do this. And then we'll build that into the budget. All right, so there's one other element to the budget that helps us stick to our budget, and that is a cash flow statement. Do you know what a cash flow statement is? A cash flow statement looks backward. Okay, so a budget looks forward and says, this is what I want to do. A cash flow statement looks backward and says, this is what I did. When I start working with a client, what I like to do is figure out where things are. So I will give them several months worth of a cash flow statement and say, please fill this out. Go back through all of your spending and really categorize, use as much detail as possible, and figure out where your money has been going, what you've been doing. And then come back to me and we'll figure out how we can frame a budget, write up a budget that's going to work for you. The cash flow statement can really help you figure out where changes need to be made. That, I think, is a big deal for people, that when you think about writing a budget, how do I stay focused? How do I stick to it? Well, you really cannot stick to it unless you know where changes need to be made. So the cash flow statement really helps. I was working with a client one time that I gave them these cash flow statements, and they actually wanted me to help them write these up. And I pretty quickly figured out where the problem was. Well, they were both working, they were making decent money, they had 3 children, and I found that they were spending $1,000 a month on dining out alone. Now, I started to reason this through. I've got 4 kids, and I thought to myself, I know exactly what's happening. He comes home, he's tired from work. She comes home, she's tired from work, and the kids are hungry and saying, Mom, Dad, what's for supper? Well, neither of them feel like making dinner, so what do? They pile it in the car and go out to eat. Except that they were flat broke. They were beyond broke. He was thinking about going bankrupt because they had so much in debt, and they were not sure how they could get out of that. So I went back to this client and I said, now, here's an issue that you should be aware of. And I said, I get it. I know why this is happening. So in order for you to reduce this, it's going to mean a lifestyle change. You're not able to just say, well, we won't eat out anymore. Yeah, right. With 3 hungry kids and both of you are tired, that's not going to happen. So this is a lifestyle change. If you're going to reduce how much you're spending, it's not as simple as not spending. You need to change the way that you do things. So maybe one of them comes home a little bit earlier and starts supper. That's one possibility. So the cash flow statement can really help you get a handle on where things are right now and then where changes need to be made. Once you have a budget in place, I still strongly recommend using the cash flow statement, because it's going to help you figure out, am I sticking to the budget? And if you're not, you can see where the problem is. You can see where the changes need to be made. So that's a very simple approach to making sure that you can stick to the budget. If you're using the cash envelope system that we talked about earlier, and you're not overspending in those categories, so when the cash is going, you stop spending, then your cash flow statement should not get too wonky every month. That's a really good tool to make sure that you stick to the budget each month. But the cash flow statement is still good because it's going to help you catch any areas that still need changes. So I recommend using all of those, and you've got links on the web page here that you can download these documents and use them for yourself. Well, we've reached the end of Money Matters. I want to thank you for watching this video today. I trust that what we have presented here has been useful for you as you're trying to answer questions that deal with George's budget and balance sheet and how to frame some goals that George can use. And hopefully, maybe you might find some things that are useful for you too.